All right, well, good morning, everyone. I'd like to call the Committee of the Whole work session together. This is Tuesday, February 15th. We have on our agenda, first of all, minutes from the Committee of the Whole work session from January 18th. And we have several presentations today. And our first one, we'd like to welcome Josh Bergstad, who is here by phone. And he's going to give us a presentation regarding ARDC. Go ahead, Josh.
All right, thank you. Can everybody hear me okay?
Sure. Yes, we can.
Yeah. Well, thank you for inviting me. Does everybody have the PowerPoint presentation available and emailed up?
Yes, we do.
Okay. So I'll just get started and I'll just tell you what page I'm on. And I guess anytime you have questions, feel free to ask. Otherwise, I'll have a little time to discuss at the end. But yes, my name is Josh Bergstad. I'm a planner with the Arrowhead Regional Development Commission, and I was asked here today to speak on the Northeast Minnesota Comprehensive Economic Development Strategy. So on page 2, what is that Comprehensive Economic Development Strategy? It's a locally based, regionally driven economic development planning process and document. It is a requirement on page 3 of the United States Economic Development Administration for ARDC and for our region to maintain our status as an economic development district. We have been the designated planning organization for that economic development district since 1969. That district is the same as our 7-county service areas, so Aiken, Carlton, Cook, Itasca, Koochiching, Lake, and St. Louis counties. And part of that designation does a couple things. One, maintaining that designation is required for our communities in our region to qualify for public works and economic adjustment assistance grants. So those are the traditional EDA construction grants for infrastructure, as well as planning grants for response to economic dislocations and shocks. So that said, it's primarily focused on EDA requirements, but it's also, it can be used for other federal programs. Like I know that you can use it for a USDA program to say that this is part of a said strategy. And then the big thing is this has to be updated at least every 5 years. Our last SEDS was adopted in 2017, and so we were due for another one anyway. And then with the pandemic, we received some extra planning grant money that we used to kind of supplement that planning process. On page 4, kind of the next kind of big overview piece is the requirement of the SEDS is that we have to have a strategy committee that is going to help us put that together. They're the principal facilitator of the process. They are the ones that we work with to develop and approve updates for the SEDS. EDA's basic guidance that they should be broadly representative of the main economic interests of the region. So we are currently working with the Arrowhead Growth Alliance as a strategy committee for the past 2 years. Arrowhead Growth Alliance is made up of kind of the executive leadership of a lot of the public and private sector interests and nonprofits. So we have representatives from the different higher education systems, from the university systems, from a lot of the county's economic development departments. We have Apex is on there, Fond du Lac Tribe is representation, IRRR, DEED, groups like that all have a delegate on there. And so they helped us develop the SEDS at a series of quarterly meetings over the past year and a half. They're going to continue working with us as we do our annual SEDS reviews and performance reports. And we're going to kind of put in place more of a workforce plan focus for them so that they can help us identify things that we should be working on each year. And finally, just kind of, again, the overview of the SEDS and EDA requires. It requires these 4 or 5 items, basically just a background on the region, our history, our economy, our assets. We conducted a SWOT analysis, strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats. Then the next part is a strategic direction action plan that sets the vision, the goals, the strategies, and then an evaluation framework. How are we going to measure if we're making progress towards the vision and towards those goals. And then finally, economic resilience as a concept. We don't need to have a separate economic resilience chapter or plan. Just keep it foremost in our planning and our funding decisions going into the future. And then again, like I said, we started this during the coronavirus pandemic. We received some additional planning money from EDA, and so the COVID recovery, future resilience, and then equity and inclusion really became important during this planning process. So those things will be addressed more out throughout the plan in kind of a more prominent way than they have in the past. So moving on to page 6, our plan is organized around 4 cornerstones. These cornerstones were developed with our other economic development districts in the state of Minnesota for our statewide development plan. And those are human capital. That's about, obviously, the people, the workforce, the labor force, the skills and educational opportunities and challenges that we need to address. Economic competitiveness, that's kind of a catch-all for business climate and traditional economic development activities such as revolving loan funds, the infrastructure, really, again, the traditional things that people think of when they think of how economic development has been done. Community resources, this is about quality of life and the things in our communities that make our communities great places to live and work. So we talk about recreation, natural amenities, arts, culture, community engagement and leadership. And then finally, foundational assets, again, another of the kind of more traditional economic development areas. And this time we kind of focus in on housing needs, broadband, as well as, again, the traditional infrastructure, roads, water, sewer, and the things that our communities need to be successful. And so if you look through the plan and we see what I'm talking about today, we really had kind of two challenges here. Is that we want to create a regional plan that can kind of be used and shared by more than just ARDC. So we wanted to identify some big regional issues that we could be a part of. And then we also wanted to have the plan be able to support a lot of the really good ground up projects that come out of our communities. Most of the stuff that I worked on a day-to-day thing is helping communities identify and access EDA funding for their projects. And so we wanted to make sure that we're getting both kind of that high level and then that more granular community-based approach, so that everything is so that if our communities want to do something that's a good project, that we can hopefully bring EDA funds to it. On page 7, this is just the process. We really kicked off in September 2020, and then with our strategy committee, we've met several times with them quarterly over the past year and a half, or I guess almost 2 years. And then one thing that we did this time around that was unique was we did a very strong public engagement section early on in the process. So we worked with the Northspan group, who facilitated 24 virtual meetings all across the Southern County region. We tried to target 2 meetings per county at least, and then we had 2 meetings with the larger business interest in the region, and then we had 2 meetings with our entrepreneurs and small businesses. And those are facilitated by Apex and the Entrepreneur Fund. And so we really tried to cover all our bases, geographically, demographically, and then getting those main economic interests. Some of you may have participated in some of those meetings. And then so we worked on this throughout last year. We're at the point now where we have a draft. Just starting yesterday, we started a 30-day public review process. We're going to be holding some meetings here in the next couple weeks. And then we'll go back to our strategy committee in March, recommend adoption, and then we'll adopt it. Our board will adopt it in April, and we'll submit it to EDA, and then we'll get to work on, I guess, our year 1 work plan. So I guess I just kind of went over that public engagement process. One thing I didn't mention is, we tried to cast as wide a net as we could, again, geographically, demographically, and we got pretty close on the final numbers in terms of being representative according to kind of each group's participation versus their representation in the community. One area that where we did not line up was our income and our education level of our participants were quite a bit higher than overall in the region. And I guess just based on the process and how we went about contacting people, that makes sense to me. But so we did dig into those two groups, as well as the BIPOC group and business owners that participated, to kind of see what each group was saying different from, their overall larger group. And so with that, we came up with the big kind of context, directions, and potential strategies around those 4 areas. And so these were the things of all the possible things you could talk about with, let's say, community resources, quality of life, health, and then public engagement were kind of the 3 that really rose to the top and stood out, as well as you see foundational assets, transportation, utilities, housing, broadband. Probably no surprise there. Okay, moving on to section or to page 10. I guess all of these plans start out with a vision, and this is very similar to our vision from 2017, but it's to help create more prosperous, resilient, diversified, and inclusive economies and communities across Northeast Minnesota. And then again, we had, with that vision statement, moving on to slide 11, we have the 4 different cornerstone areas. Under each of the cornerstone, there's a lot of stuff, and I'm only highlighting 3, the handful of things that we have identified as kind of the priority activities that our group did. And the way we did this was when we went back and we're working with our strategy committee, we asked them to break out into groups, self-selecting groups around those 4 cornerstones, look at what we had, and kind of identify the things that they thought were most important kind of to the overall cornerstone, because there is, frankly, there's just a lot of stuff in there. And so we wanted to kind of narrow it down. Everything else is still important, but these are kind of where we wound up. And strategy 1 was really, that group felt it was really important to support and understand our industries better, to be more competitive, and really focusing on innovation, sustainability, and value-added projects. And that was kind of higher level measurements of increase in GDP and increase in speed to investment. Section 2 and 3 kind of narrow down that a little bit, but develop a holistic capital and consulting support program to support the growth of businesses that have the most significant potential to scale, and then accelerate the growth of startups in the region by providing an ecosystem to help innovators and entrepreneurs. And those are similar, but strategy number 3, I think, was really focusing more on some of the, on growing helping to grow more of a tech economy up here than we have. The human capital, that group came up with 2 strategies: to support and engage in welcoming community programming. That group was really passionate about kind of a regional marketing welcoming community to help us, I guess Cook County has grown a little bit more in the past 10 years, but a lot of the rest of the region really hasn't. And so this is one thing that group was passionate about. And then ensure widespread and affordable and accessible, high-quality childcare. I don't have to tell the board that is a topic that comes up all the time and is a major challenge to economic development from employers and workers. Foundational assets. Finish building out the equitable broadband expansion with policies that bridge critical connections, enhance competition, and supports the effort. So that's an area where a lot of work is being done, and a lot of work will continue to be done. And for us to, that strategy gives us the ability to kind of start getting more involved in that. And, we'll have to focus in on how we do that. Strategy 2, work with communities and community organizations to address diverse housing needs and with an emphasis on affordability and implement local funding and policy solutions. The housing issue, I think, is an issue in every community in our region and state. Takes on a little different challenge in each community based on, what is going on. And so this group really thought that while yes, we need to look at the larger, for affordable housing money at the state level, that there are things that we can do at the local level in terms of policies and regulations and things that can maybe help drive at least help get those communities right. And then community resources. Strategy 1, improve the quality of life of the region's communities. I think this one is probably needs to be focused in a little more on, but you can see, and I'm on page 14 now, some of the items that they were concerned about. And then strategy 2, reduce disparities and health for all the region's citizens. And in this area, we're talking about food insecurity, access to medical care, access to, and actually there's a bunch more bullet points under this, but I couldn't fit them all into a slide. But access to health, not just medical care or health, but access to the ability to live a healthy life. And then again, as I said, we are kicking off our 30-day public review process yesterday. You're my first presentation. We will present to county boards upon request, and then we're going to do 2 online presentations just for kind of the general public here, and we'll be putting those dates out here today or tomorrow. And if you want to actually download the SED and look at it, you can go to that website, ardc.org/EEDS. And the SED will be on there, and then we'll also be putting up the public meeting notices up there. And then once we get those dates out, we'll be sending out an email to a few hundred people. I have a kind of an economic development mailing list of 60 or 70 people. That includes, I believe that would include the Cook County EDA and possibly the administrator. I'll have to check. And then it includes everybody who participated in our public review process basically a year ago. And so we wanted to just be able to show them that we took the public engagement seriously, and we took their responses and worked them into this plan. That's basically my presentation. If anybody has any questions or comments, feel free to ask me.
Commissioner Stolison.
Yeah, so Josh, you put together the group to develop this, and it looks to be comprehensive, and it certainly touches all the high points that I think of and that we've had discussions on. Are you going to keep that committee together in some fashion as far as how you circle back to periodically to do the measurements, follow up on the effectiveness, that type of thing?
Yeah, good question. Yes, we will. So every year with this plan, we have to do an annual performance report and strategy update. And so that usually comes in April. We won't do one this year because we'll be spending this in April, but that's what we're looking, and that's where we look at 2 things. One, has something in the economy changed or in the region changed that we need to adjust that strategy, make it, move something up in importance or cross something off the list. And then 2, we generally try to look at how the work we have done has related to this. I think one thing that I'm going to put on my work list here is to actually either develop or pull from existing sources some concrete measurements on some of those priority strategies. So, if we say we want to increase, labor force participation or GDP numbers, those numbers come out every year, and so we can start pulling those just to see if we're tracking with that.
Yeah, that was where my next question was going to. Was have you identified your source and who's going to provide each of those, the information for your metrics there? Because some of those right now, I understand the wording is at a higher level, but to get to an actual measurable, you'll have to identify something that you can measure, and who's going to provide that for you?
Yeah, we're not. as the group that I told you, the other economic development districts, we belong to an organization, the Minnesota Association of Development Organizations, and we have been working on something like that, you know, so that for all of our SADs and for the development plan, so that we can just have kind of a source that we use.
Okay.
And so that is coming.
Josh, this is Ann Sullivan, and I have a question. Are you going to be presenting to our EDA in March?
If they want me to, I can.
All right. I imagine we'll be contacting you.
Yeah, I didn't have a plan on it, but, you know, I said we'll present to county boards, but if other organizations, you know, want me to, I can basically do this presentation again.
All right, great, thank you. Any other questions? Commissioner Storley.
Thank you. Good morning, Josh. This is Commissioner Jenny Storley, and I've been on the ARDC board for a long time, and your presentation in January said to me, well, let's get you up here in the Cook County. So our administrator, Mr. Yorkie, has arranged that. And, you know, it's good to review it for all of us on the board because ARDC plays such a big role in all of the counties, whether it be our trails, our Homeland Dock, our whatever it is, and the economic growth and possibilities coming from the Fed money and the state money. We all work together on it. So thank you for this review, and I look forward to ARDC on Thursday. So,
Oh yeah, I'll be there.
Okay, good. Any other questions?
Yeah, and you know,
Go ahead, Josh.
I was just going to say, you know, we have done economic development related work in Cook County and with the Grand Portage Band, but you know, we haven't done a lot of actual EDA funded projects, and that's because unfortunately, Cook County doesn't meet a lot of the standard distress criteria that EDA uses. So you just kind of not had access to some of the money that we've been able to bring to other counties in the region that have higher unemployment or lower per capita income. But you know, we're always happy to talk to you and see if there's a project or a way that we can make something fit within the work that we do for economic development.
Well, thank you so much. We really appreciate it. Any other questions or comments for Josh today? Commissioner Mills.
Thank you. So on that note, are there other metrics to measure by as far as community needs are concerned? Because we as commissioners see a lot of very significant needs, although there is a lot of very significant wealth as well. And so that per capita income, I feel like, is a very difficult metric to use. Are there ways we can look at things a little differently?
There might be, you know, I've been seeing, well, the other thing I've been seeing focus on is on, you know, persistent poverty counties, which Cook County is not. There are a group of things called special distress criteria, and one of those is the related to the reduction of the coal economy, and so there's some time frames on that, and so there might, so for some projects or some areas based on the coal, the reductions at Tack Harbor or the shutdown at Tack Harbor, that could be a special need criteria. The project would really need to address the impacts of what happened at Taconite Harbor. There's other times where Cook County becomes eligible. Hasn't really happened in the last 2 years because everything's been, well, pandemic related, you are eligible, though those programs are closing up. But there are other things, if you have a presidentially declared natural disaster, though you can become eligible under that. Sometimes they even have special disaster money So I don't know if, the forest, I don't know if you had the forest fires in Cook County as much last year as they did in Lake, St. Louis, or if they recovered, but, there are some other things that are eligible. And if I talk to, if I'm invited to talk to the EDA next month, I'll maybe just pull up that list. I can't think of all the things off the top of my head right now. But I can pull up that list. But yeah, it is hard because obviously even where, and we can go down to like the city level or township level sometimes, but I just don't know how much it matters in Cook County.
Yeah, thank you. That's helpful. Helpful for you to explain. Kind of the lines I was thinking of is just home displacement from people not being able to afford to live here, and those kinds of impacts and trends. And I didn't know if there was a way we could measure that to try to get some sort of special criteria and then help address that trend. So.
Yeah, I would say not currently. We'll see if there's any proposed changes to EDA's distress criteria in this administration, but they've basically been set by Congress, for at least the last 10 years.
Okay, thank you.
Well, Josh, I imagine the EDA will look forward to finding more about that special distress and what are the different areas that we might qualify for some assistance. So I appreciate you looking into that, and we'll be in contact with you prior to our March meeting. Any other questions or comments from commissioners? All right, well, thank you very much, and you have a great day.
Thank you. Have a good day, everyone.
All right, thank you very much. Well, now we have another special presentation on an overview of climate emergency, a climate emergency resolution. And today we have a couple of guests with us. We have Olya Wright and Naomi Anar, and they're going to present information on engaging local governments. They've spoken already to the city council here in Grand Marais, and we're excited to have you with us. So welcome.
Thank you. Hi, I'm Olya Wright. I'm 16. I'm a chicken whisperer, cross-country skier, and climate activist from Grand Marais.
I'm Naomi Tracy Haig, and I'm 15 years old. I live 2 minutes out of Grand Marais, and I'm also a crazy chicken lady.
So this morning, we're introducing a resolution to declare a climate emergency in Cook County. And so 2 weeks ago, the city passed this resolution unanimously, and we had a really great support from the community. About 85 signatures on our petition, and lots of people came and shared their support at the city council meeting, which was great to see. So we're now working on the city level on funneling that energy from the climate emergency resolution passing to implementing direct action steps from the climate action plan. And so some of the reasons that the city cited in their resolution for passing the resolution are some of the following, which were increased climate change impacts we're seeing around the world, but also here specifically in Cook County and Grand Marais. We've had record heat waves, dangerous air quality from fires last year, and water restrictions from those same droughts, changing weather patterns that are going to challenge our winter economy here, which is so vital in the winter. And the greatest burden will be felt by marginalized communities and the youngest generation and children of our community. And there's also impacts to Lake Superior. The water levels, the warming surface waters are impacting losses of fish habitat and an increase in harmful algae blooms. Our insurance rates are rising faster than the national average, and warmer winters are leading to pests that are challenging gardening cycles as well. One other reason was that the Paris Agreement said we need to limit the temperature increase to 1.5 degrees Celsius, and currently we're already at 1.1 degrees Celsius.
So while this resolution is a statement of a climate emergency in Cook County, it's also part of a bigger statewide climate initiative in which local governments of all sizes and in all regions of Minnesota are joining us, calling for immediate action at all levels of government, local, state, and federal. And we know that a single voice is not enough. A single resolution in a single city or a single county is not enough. It's essential, but it's only when we all join together and we all make our voices heard at the same time that we can truly change the course that we're on.
So while 16 cities passed a climate emergency resolution last month, no counties followed suit. So we're hoping that Cook County can be the first and show the way, and also will encourage other counties to take action and pass a similar resolution to add to the growing movement.
And we can see that this is the time for action. It is impacting Minnesota now. And as Olia was saying before, these unanticipated occurrences of drought, higher annual temperatures, sustained heat waves, dangerous air quality, repeated incidences of 100-year floods, and these unprecedented forest fires that we've seen just wreaking havoc in the Boundary Waters. So this is happening here and now, and we have to do something about it.
So there's super strong community support behind this resolution too. Currently, our county petition has about 130 signatures, and they're coming in every day. It's really fun to watch all the support come into my inbox every day. So one of our favorite comments on our petition was the following: "Climate change is real. Please work towards making Cook County a part of the solution rather than just another place waiting to see what will happen. Our children depend on it."
Over 2,000 jurisdictions in 34 countries have declared a climate emergency, including 15 cities in Minnesota just last month, and our very own Grand Marais joining them 2 weeks ago. We know that this resolution isn't enough. It is just a statement, and we've talked with Commissioner Sullivan and Administrator Yorkie, and we see that, while the county didn't budget enough for massive action this year, we hope that we'll be able to budget more and take more decisive action next year. But this is the logical first step, and it fits really well with the dynamic state action that we're seeing at the moment. So this resolution is a way of joining other jurisdictions and showing our support towards a statewide climate initiative, which is the first step towards Minnesota's sustainable future. Thank you for your time.
Thank you.
Thank you all very much. Any questions or comments for Naomi or Olia?
Yes, I do have. Thank you for coming. And Naomi, I don't know if you recognize me under my mask, but her family moved into my grandma's and grandpa's place. So.
Yeah, I see
Liz next door.
your World's Best Donut sticker. We have the same paint on our house, red with white trim.
I really appreciate you girls doing this, coming here. I know it's not easy to appear before this kind of board, and I remember when I did similar things at your age, so I encourage you to keep doing this. So you mentioned that we didn't budget anything. What are you thinking? What dollar amount? What do you see as being important as far as financial support?
Yeah, so I would say at this point, I don't really know. It's not, I would say, our place to know what is necessary or what amounts the county is able to put towards this. But what we're able to say at this point is that this needs something that needs action. This is something that's going to impact our future, which is why we're here representing other youth and the need for action today. And so I don't know what it will look like, what action this county will decide is they're able to do, or what action they want to follow. The passing of this doesn't require any action right now. It's just a statement encouraging this higher governments with more resources to take action. But as the city has demonstrated, and other cities around the state and world have demonstrated, small cities can make a difference, small counties can make a difference. And so what steps we take in the future to address climate change here in our own community, I don't know, but I know we definitely want to see actions taken. Do you have anything to add?
Yeah, just to add on to that, like for an exact like number estimate of like what funds we're going to need, like maybe looking into 2023, it's not exactly like our place as 15-year-old high schoolers to decide how much the county needs to budget, but we do know that more significant funds need to be budgeted, and that number does need to be determined. And if that means going to experts and saying, like, what do we need to budget, what do we need to do, that's what needs to get done.
Thank you, because I agree. I personally think it needs to happen more at the federal level, that there needs to be more research and development into alternative sources, because what we're doing right now is not sustainable. We all move to electric cars tomorrow, we have a problem. So we need to figure out a way to get away from some of our critical minerals that are declining and causing issues in our supply chain. So I think we need to, our country needs to invest more in research.
That is true that at the federal level we need more research and investment. But as policymakers at the county level, I think that it's incredibly important that we take action at every level we can, because the federal government isn't going to be able to do as much as it could if it sees the policy support at lower levels of government. And there is a lot that the county can do without the federal government, like incentives for what the current development that we have.
I agree, and I think just last month we put LED lights in at the pool. It was like, yep, that's good. I hate the lighting in here. I don't think it's. So yeah, I think so my question goes back to your resolution, which I apologize, my computer died, so I don't have it in front of me right now. But some of the whereas parts, and then we get to the conclusion of what Cook County's gonna do. I do have some concerns with maybe some of the language of implying that we're gonna work towards an EV vehicle fleet. That might be appropriate for some cases, but there's just some other things in that. So did that resolution, was that wording from you, or was
That wording was from Commissioner.
Okay, just wanted to clarify.
Absolutely.
Who I should be directing my questions to.
Of course.
So thank you,
Mhm.
but thank you for your work on this. I appreciate your passion. I appreciate you coming before us.
Thank you.
Commissioner Storley.
Thank you. Girls, I know you've been working on this for a long time. All of you came before the board a few years ago. So, when we talk about money and budgeting for something, what do you see right now? What is going on, do you think, in Cook County that really sends a red flag to you?
That's an interesting question. I would say my experience is obviously only 16 years, so I can't see a lot of what we're seeing need for action is trends over a long time, and that what our human consequences on our planet are leading to overall warming and extinction of species and greater forest fires and sea level rise. And so my limited experience from the few years of my life that I can remember, actually, I don't see these big trends. But what I do see is, for instance, the forest fires last summer, the droughts. I don't remember anything like that in my past. And I remember standing on my porch, seeing the sparks, seeing the ash fall on the house. And so where I'm coming from is a sense of the urgency. You can look around the world and see that's necessary, but we also know what's happening here and that we aren't taking enough action. We don't, as the one comment said, we don't want to wait and see what will happen. We want to be at the forefront, leading the way, encouraging others to join us, and trying to create a future that's sustainable and that is livable for future generations.
So you mentioned the forest fires, and that says to me we need to work more with the federal government, with the forestry, and not that we're all out there, chopping down trees and so forth, but there's a lot that they can do to mitigate forest fires all over the world, all over the country. So partnership with a lot of people, a lot of different organizations. Is that what you see could happen that would help?
I think that's definitely a good place to start. I think another part is just addressing the emissions that our county is emitting into the atmosphere, because everything is contributing to these increases of forest fires. It's not just our forest managing techniques, which probably don't help, it's true, but there's also the need to just release less carbon dioxide, sequester more, and that will help curb the overall effects of climate change.
So emissions, obviously from cars and trucks and buildings and all of that, is there anything beyond that that's really causing concern for you?
There's a lot of different fronts, I would say, and you might have more to add on this too. But like we've been working on with the city level, there's obviously transportation, there's buildings and efficiency. A big focus is electrification right now, making sure the electricity is renewable. And part of that is out of our control, but at the city level, we worked really hard to put pressure on the power provider, and they have just switched to a more renewable energy plan. And I don't know how much credit the city can take for that, but definitely we need to work towards making sure the county's energy is going to be electric, work on electrification, but just finding all of those different places we can sequester more carbon too, but reduce the carbon that we are emitting and transfer to renewables.
Mm-hmm. Along with Commissioner Hawkins, I too, in looking this over, there's some wording that I think I would like to review. And I don't want to be held to the fact that now when we get new cars, they have to be EV. I don't know where we could go with that, but some more broader statement about that, and a few other things in here. But basically, you know, this really hits a lot of good points for us to be concerned about. My involvement with climate change is basically, I don't use plastic bags. I try to plant at least 2 or 3 trees a year. I think there's small things that each of us can do that will help mitigate something in the future. And to me, this is really great. I think we need to help people, though, to understand it's a broad topic, but what can you do locally? You know, how can we educate children in school? We did a great thing with tobacco understanding. Kids went home and said to their dad, you shouldn't be smoking those cigarettes, you know, and not that maybe they could all the time, but I think it's the small steps that really help people understand their individual role, and then it gets bigger to the city, to the county, to the state. So I guess basically I'd like to look at a few words in here, but basically it's good.
Awesome. Yeah, and I agree that lots of small individual actions are very important, and whether we can encourage those through incentives or just like education more, but it's definitely individuals taking action, small communities taking action, working together, that's going to be part of the solution.
Thank you.
Kelly?
Commissioner Mills.
Thank you, ladies, for being here, and thank you for giving me a call. I'm really trying to understand, how does county government work? What's the best way to go about this, and the different steps there? And sorry we couldn't meet the January deadline with the rest of the state there, but as you said, it doesn't all have to happen right then, just as long as we're making progress. So thank you for your continued advocacy. There's a couple areas that I'm really pleased with in the resolution. One of them is, whereas a transition to clean energy economy, if not carefully planned, would have a disruptive effect and impact on the livelihoods of many in our community, while a well-planned transition may provide expanded job opportunities for local residents. I think that's really important to understand the nuance there. This is not just like we're cutting it here and the rest is, electric. It's having that well-planned transition that's going to really get more people on board, make more partnerships, and to keep doing what we can while making improvements. And so that really stood out to me. And then looking down at kind of the more specific bullets with what we can do locally, working with the Cook County Local Energy Project and the HRA and then the EDA. I think that's really important. Some of the information that I've been hearing is just the longer term impacts when we are building houses. It's much better to spend the money up front to have that more efficient operation and lifespan, and that would have a greater impact. So that's just the types of things we can keep in the back of our mind, or the front of our mind for that matter. And then just the best practices, purchasing or leasing the electric vehicles when appropriate. And so there are some departments where that would never be appropriate, but there are other departments where this could be very practical. So those kinds of nuances I think are really important as well. And so I really appreciate And then, yeah, the state and federal climate action funding opportunities, I think that's going to be a huge factor, just what we can do with leveraging those state and federal resources. And I just think it's a really, really important and powerful message to send to both the state and the feds to help move the conversation along. So really appreciate your work on it and the leadership teams and staff's work on this as well. So I did have, I think in one of the, what do you call it, template resolutions I had more issues with, but I think this one is very well cleaned up and I don't have any issues with this.
One thing I'd like to share is just my appreciation that this is the first step. This is a declaration that there's a climate emergency and that importance of transitioning to, better methods, better energy savings. And we actually have some things in process already here in the county. We're in the process of getting an inventory of all our buildings that we have and finding out what the needs are in those buildings. And as we do that, gives us an opportunity to assess the lighting. Well, should we get rid of fluorescents and go with LEDs? Do we need to have better windows to conserve energy and decrease our costs for the taxpayer? And electric vehicles, again, when appropriate. We're not going to probably find a plow out there that's electric, but we do have an opportunity for maybe vehicles as we're replacing vehicles on our fleet to do some of those kinds of things, again, when appropriate. So I think the resolution is well designed to declare that emergency, to give us some ideas of movement in the future, and certainly discussions down the line. But that key is to jump on board and be part of this to support our state and our federal government, making finances available and resources available to counties, whether they're large or small, or cities like Grand Marais, whether they're large or small, because we are all a part of it. And I love Commissioner Storley's comments about each one of us makes a difference. Every day, the choices that we make are a start to combating our climate emergency. So that's a really important message. Commissioner Dawson.
I had other brainstorms too, just about what we can do in our community, and it's nothing we're going to do as a county board right now or anything, but just stuff to put on the radar is just looking at our waste streams. How much waste are we shipping out down the shore, and if we can reduce that, what kind of impact would that have? Or composting, or biomass plant was a proposal that the city was kind of taking on back, but then the price of propane went low enough where the dollar amount didn't make sense for that. Well, we may very well be getting back to that dollar amount, and or we're talking fossil fuel versus kind of a renewable waste product. So there's just different opportunities that as long as we continue this conversation and kind of keep our ears open and our eyes open, that we can kind of change and our I don't know, priorities or just way of looking at things. So.
Well, and I think too that as an organization, there's things we have to confront right away. As we're doing highway projects, we're putting in larger culverts because we have these horrific rain events that we have to deal with. And so, it's there for us to deal with whether we want or not. But I think that idea of planful change, planful transition, which you've suggested, is really, really important. Any other comments or remarks?
Yeah, I would just add, first of all, thanks both of you for your leadership in this work. It's hugely important, and it takes a lot of courage to put yourself out in public and carry this message forward. I'm really grateful to you for doing that. In terms of funding efforts to reduce climate change, we already have a budget, and we've got lots of line items in that budget that can support work to reduce our carbon footprint. As Commissioner Sullivan was just saying, energy use in buildings is a huge source of county greenhouse gases. And in the past, we've made decisions that frankly have not made much sense. For example, the addition on this building, the one that we're sitting in right now, was built back in 1998. They installed single pane windows to reduce the cost up front. Now, that led to a lower first cost, but it led to also extremely high energy costs. And so that's the kind of thing, we just need to be looking at our decision-making in terms of the long term, in making decisions that are cost-effective for the long term. This isn't about adding a line item to the budget. It's really about making thoughtful decisions, looking at sustainability, looking at life cycle costing, to make sure that we're making investments that make sense now and in the future. So there's a lot of opportunity there. In a past life, I worked for county government in Kansas, and we have about 600,000 residents. I did a greenhouse gas inventory for the organization, also for the community. Our biggest opportunities for reducing greenhouse gases were in our buildings, and then we also operated the wastewater system for the county, which is a huge, huge energy consumer and has a huge carbon footprint. We didn't actually have the drinking water utility, but we did do wastewater, and both of those are huge consumers of energy. And so, things like water conservation can make a big difference too. And people don't really think about that in terms of greenhouse gases, but cleaning water, pumping it, and processing wastewater all take a lot of energy. So water conservation is another big opportunity for us, and that's something that can actually save money. If you're doing it right, you're going to save money doing that. And by the way, you also reduce your carbon footprint. So, they're just common sense things that we need to be doing. And I think there are lots of opportunities for us to do that. And again, just really appreciate your helping us think about these issues. And I fully expect that in the future, as we develop our new capital improvement plan, for example, you're going to see a lot of components of that work toward reducing our carbon footprint. So thanks.
Mm-hmm.
And by the way, we have new windows that are much more efficient.
We do now.
We do now.
Commissioner Swallow.
Yeah, and the only thing I would say on this is I certainly can support it, but it needs to be something, if we're going to go in that direction to join the grassroots, initiative, is to be intentional and to actually lay out what your intentions are. So targeting areas, you don't have to be as specific. I mean, the city actually took time and put together a plan, right? So it's easier to say, when you've already done that work, put together a plan and have it there to say, hey, this is why we put together the plan. We believed it back then, we'll formalize it now and we'll put it, in writing. That's not something we've done at the county level. It wouldn't be hard for us to do it, but like everything, it takes time. Or if you're going to go in this direction, then you lay out at least your basic tenets of what it is you're going to do as you move forward, looking for those opportunities, right? But to simply put out the statement, it's interesting, but I look for something that's got some, intention. I want to make sure that when, if you do that you're stating to the folks in the county, this is what we as a board are subscribing to and what our intentions are as we move forward with review of our buildings, review of our waste streams, review of all the things that we're doing. And yes, thank you so much, ladies. I do appreciate it.
Thank you. Just excellent. And thank you so much for coming. Any other questions or comments? All right. Well, thanks again.
Thank you, guys.
All right. Great work. So we'll move on to item 2C, our update on West End development agreements.
Bringing our we haven't actually prepared a formal presentation per se, but we did want to give you guys an update on some of the conversations that we've had over the last couple of months around this. Obviously, this board approved the tax abatements for these two projects back in the fall. The discussion, and just I guess as a reminder for folks who are listening, there are two proposed developments in the West End, one which would create 14 new units of housing. That's the Hockey Homestead project, and then the Sawville Village project would create an additional 6 units of housing, which would be ADA compliant. So 20 new units of housing, and the discussion that you all had was that you wanted to see this housing be available to everyone in the community. I mean, we're especially talking about workforce housing because we know that we have the school district, the hospital, the health clinic, our organization, county government, We all have challenges hiring people because there is very little available to them to either rent or buy to live in. And so your action to approve those abatements was really focused on trying to help address that problem. And so we've been having conversations with the project sponsors since then and have reiterated your stated intention of helping address the community-wide housing issue. And so in terms of how that is reflected in a development agreement, the abatement's approved, but the abatement can't take effect without a development agreement. And that's really what we're kind of at the point of needing right now. The project sponsors have submitted their application to Minnesota Housing Finance Agency. The feedback that they got, the project sponsors, is that there's approximately $4 million available, and they've gotten almost $19 million worth of requests. So this is going to be a very competitive funding cycle. And obviously, our two project sponsors want to be as competitive in that process as they can be. So having the abatement approved is a big step. But we also, again, need to get the development agreement drafted. And part of the issue there is, how do we assure that the board's goals of providing funding that's accessible, providing housing that's accessible to everybody is met, right? These projects aren't lofty. They're not in Grand Marais. They're not close to sort of a larger population center. I mean, Woodson has some population, but so presumably the people who would move into these units would primarily be working in the West End. But we also want to make sure that, if we're having trouble attracting nurses and teachers, county government employees, that these housing units are also available to them. And the question is, how do we ensure that all of these folks have equal access to the housing? And that's something that we're still working through. Brady has reached out to try to get some examples of development agreements that include both housing and retail. And Brady, I guess I'd let you kind of take it from there. I know that you've gotten feedback that most of the development agreements that you've looked for have really been commercial and not so much focused on residential.
Yeah, I've only found one recently that had any housing, and in that case, they weren't concerned with the same things we are. It's not as big an issue there as to when you might have competition between short-term users versus long-term. So no examples there so far, but we do have one example with that Woodson housing. We did that abatement project. So I sent you this morning just the covenants. I don't know how many you had a chance to look at, so I did that out. So those covenants, we suggest, some allowable language that was in the bonding. It's the same basic statute, but that was for bonding project, and this is not for a bonding project, but it's in the same statute. So that might be a place to start. What the EDA approved with one of the colleagues. And yeah, it is a little muffled, isn't it?
It is.
With that. Yeah. And as far as the timing, they've reached out to Minnesota Housing Finance. We had also, so we've got both ends. Same message is that they won't make any decisions on grant funding until the end of March, and they're not looking for any abatement agreements from us until after that. So we kind of knew that it was April sometime. So that's the same. They had suggested to Dennis Risdall and Joe that they actually write a development agreement with the provisions that the county board would like to see and give that to us as an example. So they suggested that, and I asked it, had they worked on it, and they said, really not, because of the same timing issue. it's kind of it's almost a long shot that they're all gonna get funded. It's 19 million to 4 right now, maybe, I don't know if there's any more coming, they should all be in, but, don't really know, whose projects are favorable, but they don't wanna do all that work until they get closer to that date, so this is really an update, interim update, but yeah, I'd encourage you to read those covenants, and then, I don't know if you're ready to discuss them today, but at some point, probably before the end of, so we're ready, end of March, we should have at least an outline of what we'd like in those agreements, and we can accept whatever they send us. Now, the other project, Dieter, I don't know if he's gotten that message to send us a development agreement, but we can do it ourselves. We've got other examples, whether they're exactly with the provisions. Most of the provisions are fairly boilerplate. I've looked at a few of them because they're touching all the points on the statute and covering that. So it's really the specific differences, specifics that we want to put into it. So we can write them ourselves or have someone else actually do that. I think I sent you one this morning.
Yeah, do you think you've got enough guidance on what it is that Morgan was looking for? I mean, it was effectively, what I recall, is workforce housing is what we were looking for. So an employed person in the county and, in the residence, and we were looking for it not to be, have a loophole to bounce over into a short-term rental situation.
Right. And this is language that Brady sent us, was language that was developed by Mary Samus back when she was executive director. It talks about workforce housing, meaning housing for one person or a person who meets the following criteria. One adult, non-dependent member of the household occupying the workforce housing unit lives and works full-time in Cook County or has a bona fide offer of full-time employment within the county. And then the second piece is that the workforce housing unit must be occupied by the qualified member on a permanent year-round basis. The tenant may not sublet the unit on a shorter long-term basis or sublease. The tenant may not charge a fee for guests. So it gets us away from that Airbnb and VRBO piece. There's no qualified member residing in the workforce housing unit that is not qualified. And if the owner or its rental management agent has advertised a workforce housing unit available for rent and no qualified member comes forward, the owner may allow an employer to rent the unit for seasonal workers. So it wouldn't be just sitting vacant. So those are all the conditions, and so I would just encourage you, as Brady did, to read through those carefully. But a lot of time and effort went forward through the EDA to get it as the community wanted it. And so I think this is a really good.
That sounds very close to the topic-wise that we had kind of bounced through.
Yes.
It sure seems to hit most of those.
Precisely.
And then, in this case, it was the EDA overseeing that. I don't know what fashion they took to confirm that it was actually happening.
Looking at those next steps downstream.
That way, so, but in this case, it's the county board.
Yeah, and what they did require was a pay stub, so you got to look at a pay stub.
Okay, so on an annual basis, or?
Yes.
Okay. So there's some specific, procedures that might be referenced in the agreement too, as to.
Precisely.
Yeah, the HRA might be a good organization to do the oversight for the HRA director, rather than the county board.
Yeah,
but just trying to think of the right fit.
All right. Any other discussion or questions?
Yes, one other thing to add in terms of the finite amount of MHFA dollars available. There is talk, of course, there's a $7.7 billion state budget surplus that's being forecasted right now. And there is talk of possibly some of that funding going toward housing, but that's very speculative at this point.
And I will share with the board from the chamber's discussion with the person they have that works down in the cities, that large surplus of money does sound like a large surplus of money, and so far with the amount of things that have been put into play to ask for it, it's been spent about 8 times over. I think the term, I don't know if my number is exactly right, but it was some large multitude of once people see that there's money available, there's a tremendous amount of things coming in. So it'll be interesting to watch, how that all comes out. But I do think even in the State House, everybody sees the need on housing. So let's hope.
Well, thank you much for your hard work on it, and we'll just see where we go. Hopefully in March we'll be hearing some good news.
Yeah, we're often unique. Maybe they'll see something unique in our applications.
All right.
And hopefully today we'll hear about the redistricting. Is that right, Jody? I think it's coming out today. I don't know if we can go on the website or whatever, but.
Oh, the state.
From the state.
Blue State,
Yeah.
Yeah, Dave's not done yet.
Oh, that's easy.
No way.
Yeah.
Just getting going. It was interesting though. There was an article, maybe it was NPR. It had the different
Yep.
person's proposal. Very interesting stuff. Holy cow! You can do a deep dive there.
Yeah.
Yep.
All right. Well, we have minutes of our standing committees there from personnel and our building committee. And with no other business, we can adjourn.
All right.
So we shall.
We will.